Okay, welcome to our PsyD webinar. My name is Bradley Cypher, and I am the PsyD Admissions Advisor here at Divine Mercy University. I am joined by rising third-year doctoral student in psychology, Isaiah Lamb. And so the format of this webinar will be as follows. First, I will go through a presentation of the sort of like the salient features of our program here in the PsyD program at DMU. And then we'll conclude with a little bit of a talk by Isaiah, and he'll tell a little bit about his story and his beginning in psychology and his experience in the doctoral program. And then third, we'll conclude with some of your questions. So after we're going to go through the program, and be sure to drop your questions in the chat box, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen here and for just a sec. The doctoral program in clinical psychology at Divine Mercy University. And this is me, Bradley, the admissions advisor. All right, so Divine Mercy University is a Catholic institution comprised of 2 schools. It is dedicated to the scientific study of psychology with a Catholic Christian understanding of person, marriage, and family. It was founded in 1999 as the Institute for the Psychological Sciences. And in 2014, the Institute launched its MS in Psychology program online with its focus on educating working professionals. In 2015, IPS was renamed Divine Mercy University, DMU, with the addition of the School of Counseling. And Isaiah, feel free to chime in whenever you see fit. All right, so this gives sort of a pictorial image of sort of what I just described in the prior slide, namely that we have 2 schools within Divine Mercy University, the School of Counseling and the Institute for the Psychological Sciences. And within the School of Counseling, we offer a Master of Science in Counseling, which is online and hybrid. And by that, I mean it's primarily an online program for our counseling students, but there's a period of time toward the end of their time here in which they come to campus for their clinical experience. And then within the Institute for the Psychological Sciences, we have the doctoral program in clinical psychology, which is residential. It's a residential in-person program, and a Master of Science in Psychology, which is exclusively online. So our mission at Divine Mercy University is to provide students with an effective academic and educational environment that supports the integration of the psychological sciences and the Catholic Christian understanding of the person, and to prepare students to respond to their vocation as mental health professionals. We are located in Sterling, Virginia, which is in Northern Virginia, part of the greater Washington metropolitan area. And as you can see, for those of you who aren't familiar with the area, we have lots of things to do here. To the west, we have things like whitewater rafting, hiking. We have extensive panoply of vineyards for you to enjoy. To the east, we have our nation's capital. This area is absolutely rich in history. We have been around the East Coast in the colonial times, the Civil War era, and going into modernity. And so for history lovers, there are many places that you could frequent if you are so interested. Isaiah, do you have have you enjoyed any of these places here?
Yeah, one of the things I love about, and you kind of mentioned it, the location, is that like any activity you can think of is pretty much within reach. So I love going out west into the Appalachians, along the Shenandoah, camping, doing things like that. But yeah, I also love going into DC proper, hitting all the museums. And then not even that, but like you can go all the way up the East Coast pretty easily too. So I have friends up in New York City that I visit pretty frequently. And yeah, the sky's kind of the limit with things you can do in the area.
Fantastic. Excellent. So there's something for everyone, in short. All right, so let's talk a little bit about our accreditation. So we are accredited on a number of levels. First of all, we are accredited through SACS, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. SACS accredits many different colleges and universities throughout the South. It's sort of the accreditancy agency through the Department of Education. And Divine Mercy has voluntarily participated in the accrediting process and has met or exceeded all standards in thorough evaluation. It's also approved to operate by SCHEV, the State Council of Higher Education in Virginia. And the PsyD program has been recognized since 2006 as a National Registered Designation Program by the Association of State and Provisional Psychology Boards. And this is especially worthy of note, the PsyD program has been accredited by the APA, the American Psychological Association, since 2016. And Divine Mercy has been approved to participate in a National Council for State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement. So as you can see, we're thoroughly accredited by a number of accreditation agencies. All right, so clinical psychology is the psychological specialty that provides continuing and comprehensive mental and behavioral health care for individuals and families, consultation to agencies and communities, training, education, and supervision, and research-based practice. That's sort of like a very short snippet of the nature of clinical psychology. All right, so on this slide, we see a broad overview, a sketch of what your experience how it charts out over the course of the 5 years for our students in the doctoral program. Now, it is 122 credit hours, which includes both a Master of Science in psychology and a doctoral degree in psychology. So the master's is granted after the first 2 years, after completion of 60 credits. It's a master's in passing, en route to the eventual doctoral degree at the end of the program. And it is on-site, as I mentioned. It's an in-person on-site program in Sterling, Virginia, and prepares ultimately for clinical licensure as a psychologist. So in year 1, we have coursework. And in the beginning of year 1, or sort of throughout year 1, students should be thinking about dissertation research, getting with a faculty member of like-minded, something that they can share interest in and sort of begin sort of taking their first foray or their first step into research for eventual dissertation defense in the 4th or the 5th year. In year 2, coursework continues, but key here is that in year 2, students will begin seeing patients. Okay, so we have an on-site, on-campus clinic, the IPS clinic, and so this is sort of like the home for our doctoral students to see patients and sort of begin their sort of clinical training under the supervision of a faculty member. Isaiah, did you want to speak to that at all? Is that
Yeah, happy to say a bit about that. It, like you were saying, it is the first kind of clinical experience you have. And it's really well tailored to the student's needs. So the clinic does a good job of making sure cases aren't too intense or anything like that. And there's just a lot of supervision given during that time. And it's really aimed at just giving the students kind of a confidence that they can do clinical work and that they can make a difference in the lives of their patients. So it's a really awesome way to kind of help the students dip their toes into clinical work and get into the field and get into the practice, which so many of us like came to this degree for. It wasn't just for academics, but it was for putting it in practice. And so I just finished in the clinic. It was a really great experience and a great way to start clinical work.
Fantastic. How would you say the clinical work and the coursework shift from years 1 and 2 to years 3 and 4?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot more. It's kind of front loaded. So a lot of your coursework really happens in the first 2 years. So it's a lot of courses, up to 16, 17 credits a semester. Once you get into your 3rd and 4th years, you actually move your training more to the external sites. So students will find a variety of places in the Washington metro area. And so then you move to having class twice a week. And the rest of that week, you're generally working in some sort of clinic, in some sort of clinical setting. So it really starts to shift to like, okay, we gave you the background, the theory, and now we're gonna you're not gonna stop doing that, but you're gonna start putting it into practice.
Gotcha. So you would say it's sort of the classes are sort of front loaded and then it sort of diminishes, and then but you have the increase in the clinical work as it moves through the program. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so And then the 5th year, we have our internship off campus at a site completely removed from campus. And as you can see underneath there, we have various sites that our students go to, all of which are APA accredited, and we have 100% placement for that. So you'll go to various places such as St. Elizabeth's Hospital in DC, the Psychiatric Hospital Washington, Virginia Medical Center. So this is a sort of, again, a sort of encapsulation of what to expect in our program. Okay, so things to consider if the PsyD is right for you. Do you want to help people flourish? Are you interested in the science behind human behavior? Do you want to become an instrument of healing through the psychological sciences? Are you interested in performing psychological tests and assessments to diagnose your clients and create treatment plans? Are you looking to start a career as a licensed mental health professional, specifically as a clinical psychologist? So it's just some things to keep in mind. All right, so here are the main 6 areas of competency that we aim to develop over your time in the doctoral program. The first is foundations in psychological sciences and research. 2nd, integrity and practice. 3rd, assess and diagnosis. 4th, therapeutic intervention. 5, professional roles. And 6, clinical practice from a Catholic integrative perspective. And this 6th one is quite unique, I would say, to Divine Mercy. It's true that there are other doctoral programs that are from Catholic institutions, but Divine Mercy places a particular emphasis on this one. We have our own meta model of the human person that's been pioneered by our very own professors and founders of IPS, now Divine Mercy. And so this is sort of the way in which we kind of bring everything together through our Catholic philosophy, theology, and view of the human person. So I'm going to touch upon each of these areas. So the first one, the foundations in psychological sciences and research. Graduates will obtain foundational psychological science knowledge of biological, cognitive, affective, social, and developmental aspects of the human person, as well as history and systems of psychology, psychological measurement, research design, and statistical method. Graduates will have the skills necessary to conduct their own psychological research. 2, integrity and practice. Graduates will be knowledgeable in the areas of diversity and ethics and display critical thinking, self-aware reflective practice, and self-care. Graduates will demonstrate responsiveness to supervision, collegiality, and professional comportment and professional practice. 3, assessment and diagnosis. Graduates will be able to conduct clinical interviewing, perform intake evaluation, demonstrate knowledge in the administration, scoring, and interpretation of psychological assessment, integrate multiple sources of data, test data, and clinical interview information into a written report, diagnose and develop a treatment plan. And number 4, therapeutic intervention. Graduates will be able to demonstrate case conceptualization, treatment planning, building and maintaining the therapeutic relationship, psychotherapy skills, crisis management of urgent and special circumstances, discharge planning as well. 5, professional roles. Graduates will be able to function in a variety of required roles of professional psychologists to include consultant, educator, supervisor, practice manager, and program evaluator. They'll be able to work collaboratively within interdisciplinary teams and with clients. And then 6, clinical practice from a Catholic integrative perspective. Graduates will have developed a Catholic understanding of human flourishing in the individual person and marriage and family life, and be able to integrate this within the psychological sciences and clinical practice. Okay, so there are many, many things you can do with a doctoral degree in clinical psychology. And so this list here is non-exhaustive. There are many, many other things, but just to take a few of them, you could enter private practice and have your own clinic. You could be a clinic director, a psychiatric clinician, psychiatric crisis unit interviewer, community mental health social worker, drug abuse social worker, and drug and alcohol specialist. As you can see, the list goes on and on. There are many, many different specialties within psychology that you could decide to focus on. And the one among many good things about our program is it's a general one in which we have faculty that have specialty that are sundry and diverse, and there's so many different areas that you could go into. Some programs specialize in forensic or other areas that have sort of more narrowed, honed in things, but whereas our program is much more general. And so we can accommodate a wide range of interests and match those interests with expertise in our faculty. Okay, so these are a few student testimonials from our alumni. James Wolowich has said, in our clinical psychology program, the training is focused on healing the whole person. Here, Kristen Long has said, I was drawn to the PsyD program out of a desire to serve others in a more profound way than my previous positions offered. Timothy White has said, this school is not afraid to teach you what it means to be human at every level, psychologically, philosophically, and theologically, and that's why I like it. And then Kirsten Curtis has said, I am so thankful for DMU. The faculty members are very supportive, and I receive a lots of hands-on clinical experience. So lots of happy alumni. Okay, this is a brief testimonial by one of our doctoral students.
Hi, my name is William Johnston, and I'm a PsyD student at Divine Mercy University, currently approaching the end of my third year in the program. Military service runs in my family, and so both my grandparents served, my parents both served. This door, the PsyD program at Divine Mercy University, opened that opportunity for me to continue to give back, to conduct research, and hopefully implement a more robust program to treat PTSD as it relates to combat veterans. DMU has certainly provided the integration that I've sought in terms of my formation, both the philosophy and theology core, in addition to the psychology curriculum, has provided me growth in terms of my faith and my role as a husband and father, and of course a psychological clinician. So in essence, the Catholic Christian meta model of the human person is why I'm here, both for my own sake as well as the sake of my future clients.
I would say that being a student at Divine Mercy University, or DMU, is one of the best things that happens to me. I really appreciate a great support from faculty members and also classmates. I have gained a great deal of knowledge in all aspects of clinical practice, research, and also professional development. DMU not only provides students with strong academic skills, but also prepares them for a career in psychology. I personally benefit from mentorship with academic advisor and clinical supervisors. As a person, what I most appreciate from DMU is that its mission helped broaden my perspectives in understanding a human person through the lens of Catholicism. Catholic principles, especially in hope, love, and faith, are very valuable and certainly helped me become a better clinician.
I'm originally from the state of South Dakota. And so I grew up there most of my life, went to school at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. I studied psychology there, but I kind of intended to go into the medical field. And then after, kind of in the midst of my undergraduate, I discerned that I wanted to go to the seminary, the Catholic seminary, to study to be a priest. So I had this love for psychology that was kind of there, I think, from an early age, just wanting to know how people function, why they do the things that they do. And then I found myself in seminary learning all these philosophical truths about humans. One of the first courses I took was philosophy of the human person, learning person's body and soul, and that there's this profound dignity attached to being human. Later discerned out of the seminary, returned to Nebraska to finish up my degree, and deciding at this point, well, I don't really want to go into medicine, but I do have this desire to care for people. And I also have learned, again, this philosophy about humans and their goodness. So I took a year off. I built pipe organs for a year. I always love telling people that. It's a pretty unique job. It was fun. But ultimately that led me, I decided to then do a year of service with the homeless in Denver, with an organization called Christ in the City. And there I like to say that all the things I had been learning about and dreaming about, psychology, philosophy, it was this incarnational experience of encountering people on the street in this profound suffering, mental anguish, substance abuse, what have you. And just actually experiencing that firsthand made everything kind of click for me. Like, okay, I have the ability to affect change and bring hope to people in the worst moments of their life. And so for me at that point, it was just very clear everything was starting to converge, and I felt more so that I wanted to pursue psychology. And so DMU was kind of my first choice, because everything that I had been learning about kind of just, again, converged here, right? The psychology, the philosophy, the theology, and it just seemed like the perfect fit. So I applied, and long story short, I got in, and in my second year now, and it's been absolutely more than I could have hoped for. I've had so much knowledge shoved in my brain the last year. I don't even know how it's possible, but it's just been a beautiful and awesome journey.
So let's take a look at our selected highlighted faculty members. The first professor on the left-hand side, upper left-hand side, is Dr. Lisa Kowalewicki. She's our program director. She specializes in adolescent, adult, and couples therapy. To her right is Dr. Diane Graves, who is a child psychologist, a child and developmental psychologist. To her right, Dr. Anna Pecoraro. It has a specialty in addiction and trauma research. And then the three gentlemen at the bottom, Dr. Scarfani, Dr. Nordling, and Dr. Vitz, all of whom were founding faculty members at what was once IPS and now Divine Mercy University. Dr. Scarfani has specialized in cognitive behavioral therapy and group therapy, Dr. Nordling in child, marriage, and family therapy, and Dr. Vitz has done some really interesting research on the interplay and intersection between Christian theology and philosophy on the one hand, and modern empirical psychology on the other. It's lots of fascinating books out on those subjects. Okay, there he is, Isaiah himself. All right, so let's look a little bit about licensing. So is licensing required? A license to practice is required by each state and or jurisdiction where individuals might practice as a counselor. When? Licensing process begins after the student completes the practicum, an internship, and officially graduates from Divine Mercy program. States can and often do have additional and differing requirements. Students are responsible for checking state requirements where they plan to work and adhere to them. These typically include national and state exams. DNU will provide general information related to licensure during the student experience. So who initiates licensing? Licensing is a student-driven process. It is important for the student to begin research of licensing requirements in the state he or she intends to work in as early in the program as possible. Now, will students be fully licensed after graduation? No. Graduates must work approximately 1 year in a supervised clinical environment in addition to other state requirements to be licensed. The graduate may be required to obtain a provisional license for this period. And be sure to check your state for particular requirements. Did you want to say anything about that, Isaiah?
Yeah, not too much to add, but it's definitely something to look into, just sometimes even before you apply, because different states do have very different requirements. So just to get a sense of what you're looking for. Usually it is an extra year, if not 2 after graduation. So that's helpful to know in your long-term plan of doing the degree.
Good, very good, thank you. Okay, so this is a schematic sort of illustrating for you the nature of how you invest your money. On the one hand, on the left-hand side, you can see how a car investment works. It quickly and rapidly depreciates in value soon after you buy it. Whereas investing in your mind, investing in your education and yourself will appreciate. As you move through your career and you develop expertise, your value to different clinics and hospitals will augment. It'll become more and more formidable. And so these are the kinds of things that are sort of worthwhile to bear in mind when you're undertaking an investment such as a doctoral program in clinical psychology. Ultimately very worthwhile. So this is a slide just about the finances of undertaking a doctoral degree here. So as I say, it is an investment. $1,095 per credit at 122 credits is 133,590 in total, and that does not include fees and indirect expenses. And as you can see, there is a number of options for paying. Federal aid is available, the William D. Ford, the Federal Direct Student Loan Program, unsubsidized Stafford loans, Graduate Plus loans. And it's good to bear in mind that once you begin the application and you submit the application, our financial aid office will be in touch with you shortly thereafter and send you a welcome email and begin the process of working with you to figure out how to prudently fund the program. And as you can see underneath there's plenty of other sort of ways of going about funding, assistantships and federal work study programs, and then alternative financing options, cash plans, private funds, agencies and organizations, matching funds, support groups, diocesan investment, MOUs with dioceses, these kinds of things. So there's many different ways of going about it. So there you have it. On the next slide, we have a little bit of a schematic of the different scholarships available to you. Now, our policy is we can apply, each student can apply to up to 4 scholarships, and you're eligible to receive 2 of them. And once you apply and once you receive notice from financial aid and going through the application process of applying up for scholarships, you'll notice that not all the scholarships may apply to you. So for example, if you look at the bottom here, the Christendom Scholarship is for, well, Christendom students, or the Faith and Hope Scholarship for clerics and religious. And so, go through all of these and sort through which ones apply for you and which ones you're eligible for. Okay, so this slide is a little bit about our entrance requirements. We require a baccalaureate degree from a regionally accredited or internationally recognized school. An undergraduate degree in psychology is preferred. However, students admitted without an undergraduate degree in psychology, it happens with a great deal of regularity, but they would be required to complete a prerequisite course during the first year of study. So that's typically an online class that goes on through the first year, concurrent with the other courses that you would be taking in the program. So psychology is preferred, it's not required. We have plenty of non-psychology majors that enter our program and do very well. So we require a minimum GPA of 3.0 on a 4.0 scale, and applicants with a cumulative GPA of less than a 3 may be considered for admission on a case-by-case basis. So if you're sort of on the cusp of a 3 and you're not quite there, send me an email. We can talk through it with the program director, Dr. Wiki, to see about moving forward with that. Okay, this is a rundown of our application process. So the first thing to do is complete the application, which is online. And then, as I said, after that, you'll receive an email from financial aid to begin working with you upon receipt of the application. And then thereafter, we do our very best to maintain consistent communication. And then once all documents are submitted, the competitive applicants are invited for an interview on our campus at DMU. And we have 3 interviews in this academic cycle in this year. So we have the first one is November 11th, the second is January 27th, and then the last one is in March 10th. And then all applicants will hear back with an admission decision by mid-February. And then the program will begin on August of next year, 2023. Okay, so how to complete your application package. It is an online application form, as I mentioned. And so the first part is the form online, which includes a $55 application fee. And then the second part consists of your essays and your resume. And additionally, we do require 3 letters of recommendation, 2 of which must be academic in nature. So typically seek out good recommenders, strong recommenders, such as professors that you've had in college or in graduate school. And then a third reference from someone who maybe knows you really well and can speak to your personal strengths and your personal qualities. And then, of course, all official transcripts from post-secondary institutions are required. So anything beyond high school, if you know, for college, then of course, if you've gone to graduate school. And then the official GRE general test scores we do require, and that is a non-negotiable. We do require a GRE test score from all of our applicants, and it must be relatively new within the past 5 years. Okay, this is a slide providing information for international applicants. So for international applicants and applicants whose baccalaureate degree was earned at an institution outside of the United States, please just be aware of these things. So applicants holding degrees from outside the US must submit an international transcript to NASA's approved evaluation service, such as WES.org, for a course-by-course evaluation of their transcripts. And applicants holding degrees from outside the United States must demonstrate post-secondary education that is, at a minimum, equivalent to a US baccalaureate degree. And if the credential is not in English, the credential must be translated into English. And the cost for evaluation will be the responsibility of the student. Applicants whose primary language is not English may need to take the TOEFL test, which is, a test to test your English abilities. So that's that for the international applicants if you are coming to us from abroad. And that concludes our presentation. So thank you very much for your attention. And at this point, I want to transition to Isaiah and to sort of allow him to speak for a little bit about his own background, how he got interested in psychology, and his general experience at DMU. So Isaiah, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Bradley. That was a really good rundown of everything in the program. I'm realizing that the process is getting further and further away from me, the application process, that is. So I'll when the questions come up, I'll do my best to answer them. I think I can remember it pretty well. But just to talk a bit about myself, I actually am originally from South Dakota. I find that many people on the East Coast don't know much about South Dakota. They don't even know if it exists, really. But it's a great place. I loved growing up there. I then went to school in Nebraska, another flat area. But I went there for my undergraduate degree. I spent 2 years there, and I was studying medicine. I was pre-med at the time while also studying psychology, and had just a fantastic time there. I did the marching band. I was on the drum line there. And then during my second year, I actually started discerning a call to the priesthood. So I left Nebraska for a year, went up to Minnesota for a year in the minor seminary there. And while I was there, I started taking philosophy classes, which are recommended, or sorry, not recommended, required as a seminarian studying for priesthood. And I was just really blown away by the way that philosophy operated, the way it sought truth, no matter what the truth was, and logic, just even taking logic classes. So I feel like my mind was just opened up to this way of questioning the world and questioning the things around you. And in a particular way, our philosophy focused on the human person from a Catholic perspective, but just even what did the ancient philosophers say about what humans were? So I really latched onto that. And though I didn't necessarily want to go and get a doctorate in philosophy, I am so grateful for the ways in which it made me start to think about things differently. And in a particular way, the human person, the body and the soul, and the ways in which a human person is created and what their ends are. So I actually, at that point, I discerned out of the seminary, felt called out, and I returned back to Nebraska to finish my degree in psychology. So at that point, I had just kind of shifted. I had moved 3 times in the last few years. And so I just wanted to kind of settle and figure things out. I got my degree in psychology, but at that point, I wasn't sure that I wanted to do medicine like I did before. There was something about me that wanted to serve people on a deeper level. And to me, it became more than just fixing broken bones or a heart attack. That was obviously important, but I wanted to go deeper into the human experience. So after I graduated, I took 2 gap years, and the first one was to go build pipe organs for a year, which of course is the natural next step after getting a degree in psychology. But that was like I said, I'm a musician, so that was a really good way to just, try something new. And while I was doing that, I actually ended up visiting one of my friends in Denver, Colorado, and he was doing a mission program called Christ in the City, where they worked with the homeless. They would go out every single day and just spend time with the homeless. The idea was like building relationship with those suffering from homelessness, because the root of homelessness is like this loneliness. Like for a person to become homeless, they have to have like no one to turn to.
Yeah.
So my friend invited me to that. And I went on a street walk, and I just like absolutely fell in love with it. And at that point I was like, I have to do this. So it was just very clear. I decided to sign up for a year of that program and spent the following year in Denver, spending every day on the streets, just ministering to the homeless, whatever they needed, mostly friendship, but if they needed help getting IDs, anything like that, we were there to accompany them. And through that experience, I always kind of just describe that as like the incarnation of like everything I'd learned before, like the psychology, the philosophy, the theology. And then here is this human person in their suffering and in their beauty right in front of me on the streets. And so that convinced me, like, yeah, okay, I think I want to do something like this for the rest of my life. And from that, I had heard about DMU from a focus conference, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, and I applied, and it was a really quick process. I got accepted pretty quickly, and I suppose the rest is history. So,
as they say.
As they say.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Isaiah, that's a wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
At this point, we're going to segue into a little bit of a Q&A. So I just wanted to make you guys aware that I did post the Calendly link, my email, alumna and alumnus testimonial, and then the application there is in the chat box. So after we're finished, all that information is there for you at your disposal. Feel free to set up a time to meet with me, and we can absolutely answer more of your questions that didn't get attended to now. But go ahead and put all your questions in the chat box now, and we're going to get started with the Q&A. So some things that people wanted to know. One person asked, what is the relationship between counseling psychology and clinical psychology? I'll let Isaiah take this one because I think that's right down his alley.
Yeah, that's a great question. Counseling psychology versus clinical psychology, and at a certain point, I don't want to say it's like splitting hairs, because there is a difference, and there are counseling psychology programs. My understanding is going to be like somewhat limited in that I have not done a counseling psychology program, so I couldn't tell you all the differences. What I can say is they're very, very similar. And my understanding is that counseling psychology, just like the field of counseling as a whole, is kind of focused on just that, like counsel, providing counsel, helping people, through whatever difficulties they may be facing. Clinical, on the other hand, is there's an interest. We do the same thing. We're like doing therapy and helping people through those situations. But there's also a much like bigger focus and study of the pathologies that underlie. So the mental illness that is underneath, and actually treating that. So it's really, again, like kind of splitting hairs. There's going to be a lot of the same types of things here in clinical psychology programs. We also learn assessment, which it's possible is a part of the counseling psychology program. But generally, clinical, we're definitely focusing on assessment, learning the tests to administer to people, and get a sense of like what's going on clinically here and how to treat it, as
Mm.
well as the treatment of it.
Yeah, yeah. So would you say it's fair to say then that okay, so they're more similar than different,
Yeah.
for sure. Though assessment being sort of like the hallmark of clinical psychology. Would you say it's fair to say that a clinical psychologist deals more with more severe pathologies on average than the average counseling psychologist?
Yeah, and again, this is kind of where my knowledge might be kind of limited. I know for sure compared to like counselors, like someone who were to receive like a master's in counseling, it's definitely dealing with more severe pathology and the assessment of that. That's not to say counselors can't work with severe pathology, but in the clinical realm, we are very much like focused on that. Yeah, so I'm trying to remember the other half of your question. Sorry.
That was just like I mean, so a counselor could work with this population, but just sort of like in general, on average,
Yeah.
typically a clinical psychologist will work more with more severe mental disorders than typically the average counseling psychologist.
Yeah, I would say that clinical psychologists have the ability to do that. You can definitely work with any population that you desire. So if a person didn't want to work in a psychiatric hospital as a clinical psychologist, they wouldn't have to, but their training would certainly prepare them for that, or at least open a door for that. Whereas someone who's doing counseling, again, could get into that realm, but you're going to have to seek a more specialized training program to be able to become competent for that.
Gotcha. Very good. Okay. How does one person asked, how does work life and family work out with this program? So you can sort of speak to your experience with the interplay between them.
Yeah, it's certainly something that you have to grow in. It's a skill, I would say kind of a human skill that you have to seek out in a lot of ways, especially when you get into a clinical field. Taking care of yourself is very important. And it's kind of the basis for a lot of the work that you're doing. So it can be difficult. I can't really speak to what it's like to have a family and raise them. I know plenty of people in the program who have many kids and are raising a family while they're doing this program. And I think that's amazing. I don't know how they do it. I would tell you their secret if I knew. But for me, it's been very helpful. I'm very extroverted. So it was just kind of one of the first things I did was who can I meet? How can I become friends with people? So certainly it takes some discipline. I will say that to be able to make sure that you're getting, enough sleep and setting time aside for yourself to enjoy company of people, to enjoy some comfort, some leisure, so that you can do your studies and your job well.
Sure. I imagine to do this kind of thing, it requires kind of equilibrium and kind of balance within yourself, right?
Yeah. And I would say that's an important thing that you have to learn as you get into the field, right? If we want to help others to find balance in their life, we have to kind of learn and go through that process ourselves and be formed in that way.
For sure. Gotcha. Okay, so somebody asked, is there a difference in Catholic versus Christian perspective in speaking of the DMU approach to understanding and treating the whole person?
Difference in Catholic versus Christian perspective. I don't know how much I can really speak to that difference, especially not having, there are several Christian psychology programs throughout the US that do good work. I would just say there that I believe the Catholic philosophy has a much deeper richness that goes back further. The philosophical tradition is unmatched in so many ways. And Bradley, you might have more, thoughts on that yourself. But I would say that's kind of the main difference, is that Catholic philosophy pulls on much more deep philosophy than the Christian church, which traditionally is only, 500 some years old, whereas
Sure.
Catholicism
Yeah.
has 2,000 years of tradition and discerning what the human person is. So I could maybe say more, but maybe you have something you want to add, Bradley.
Well, I think that sounds right. I mean, so we've been doing this for a very long time, right? The church has, and I think it seems that in a way, what DMU is doing is really a sort of logical consequence of what the church has been doing for the 1900 years that predated modern psychology, right? So the interface between nature and grace, how do we make sense of a reality that is sort of has, part of it, the way in which grace intersects with nature, to heal on the natural level and at the level of the supernatural, right? And I think that DMU tries to bring that project that's been going on for a long time with modern empirical science, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
guys, this is Tom. If I may interject just one thing, I think it's an excellent question, but the other part of the answer is, in addition to the length of time and scholarly approach, if you will, towards the integrated model, Divine Mercy University builds all of their programs from scratch. We have a content team that's made up of several subject matter experts from religion, philosophy, the sciences of counseling, and in this case, psychology. And all of that is put together in the programs. So one of the differences, and it's really it's the biggest difference, quite frankly, is the Catholic Christian meta model of the person, or what we call the integrated model, is weaved throughout all of our programs. And a distinction here is understanding this. We're not teaching people how to be Catholic. We're teaching people how to be the best psychologists and counselors they can be. And that really does show up, quite frankly, in outcomes, what we consider outcomes. Outcomes are, our graduates, the work they do, and in particular, getting APA placements and internships, getting through their licensing and things like that. And right now we have simply put as exceptional results. Our students are graduating at a very high rate. We have very little turnover in the program, and they get placed in very competitive internships. And the comments coming back both from the sites and employers is that our graduates come out much better prepared than folks in many other programs. Let's put it that way. And much of it has to do with the work that's done through the integrated process. And I'll let Isaiah even jump in a little bit there, but really that's the second part of that answer, I think.
Yeah. In some ways, when I applied to the program, I was kind of struck by how universal, like what's so effective, like Tom is saying about the meta model, is that it strikes every human person. Like it gets to the root of that. And it's not that it's Catholic, it is, but like it's that it's true and that it is effective, and it leads to flourishing for any human person, right? We all are interpersonally relational. Like our well-being is helped by our social nature. We all have vocations, whether we call it that or not. So yeah, I think that's thanks for those comments, Tom. That's a really big piece of it all.
Yes, thank you, Tom. Well said. All right. Angela Dunn, says, does license in different states usually require taking that state's test if you've already passed in one state, Virginia?
So yeah, again, you have to just look at different states. If you have an idea of like what state you might want to move to, just check that out. Some have some will ease the requirements if you're licensed in another state. I think DC is one of them, where it's a little bit easier if you've been licensed in a different state to move to DC. There is a national exam. It's called the EPPP. So that should theoretically cover any state you want to go to, but I'm not going to guarantee that. you would definitely have to check each state, including ones you might consider moving to later.
Good,
But,
very good.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Someone else asks, from the presentation, one gains a Master of Science in Psych after successful completion of the second year with qualifying exams and continues on to the PsyD program in the 3rd through 5th year.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure if this is what is being got at, but the program in the past had been that you would apply to the Masters of Clinical Psychology program. And then once you complete your master's, you would then apply for the doctorate program. That's not the case anymore. And you can fill me in or fill in where you need to, Bradley. But it is now like you apply for the doctorate program and you are in that. And after your second year, you do receive a master's just because you have kind of enough credits. But it's not really, at least in my understanding, a degree that you're meant to kind of stop at. It's just kind of like a credentialing sort of thing. So all students generally will continue beyond that into their 3rd through 5th years.
Sure.
And to the question about qualifying exams,
there
is no qualifying exam for the masters. You do take comps, comprehensive exams after your 3rd year. So pray for me for that. That'll be coming up.
Will do.
Yeah, but no exams for the masters other than the exams to pass your courses.
Very good. Yeah. Okay, and then just under that, it was most likely an early screen share, but does clinical psych incorporate educating and supervising psychology, which I've seen elsewhere as a separate course?
Yes, it does. This program, and I believe it's an APA requirement, actually wants students to be trained in how to supervise and how to educate. So we have a class that you take your 4th year called the Psychologist as Supervisor, Consultant, and Educator. I may have the order mixed up there, but you are specifically trained in that class, but actually throughout your program, it's a requirement that you're giving presentations in all of your classes. So you get experience like distilling information and presenting it in ways that are digestible to either other psychologists or just, a lay person who knows nothing really about psychology. It's actually a very important part of the training.
Okay. So maybe a question I have for you, Isaiah, what has sort of been the most challenging and the most enjoyable part of the program for you?
Yeah, great question. I'll start with the challenging so we can get to the good parts of it.
Okay.
I think the most challenging part has been, the program. I mean, it's a doctoral program, especially in your first couple years where the courses are really, the course load is pretty heavy. You're just getting, I remember thinking like, I'm getting so much knowledge shoved into my brain and I don't know how to retain all of it. And that was like a really satisfying feeling, but also like kind of an overwhelming one. You are learning so much. And that's maybe a good part of it. Is a good part about it, but maybe that's one of the best things about it is that even when you're going through kind of the challenging moments, it's all benefiting you. So I think the second year is pretty widely known as the most difficult, just because you have a full course load, you're taking some of your most difficult courses, and then you're seeing patients for the first time. So you have all the anxiety that kind of comes with that. And the, am I gonna be okay at this? You're also starting work on your dissertation. So the second year is pretty challenging in that way, just that it makes you, it just really makes you focus on what you want. And for me, it took a lot of discipline to, again, make sure I'm getting enough sleep, that sort of thing. But I will actually, and it is very much tied to that, the most challenging thing. The most rewarding thing, actually, so far for me has been like kind of this summer to the present. I spent some time actually back in South Dakota, getting some experience doing psychological evaluations that I had just learned in the last year. And so I can't tell you how much more confident I felt coming out of that second year doing those assessments. Like, oh, I actually, like, I had my master's. Like, there's a long way to go. There's a lot I still have to learn, but I know some things and I'm able to help some people here.
Yeah.
So that feeling was pretty incredible. And I think right now it's just kind of like, okay, how can I get more of that? How can I continue to be an instrument of healing for people? How can I like increase my knowledge? But it kind of just set, like, for me, it kind of confirmed like, yep, this is definitely something I want to keep doing. And I'm really looking forward to all the things I'm going to learn and all the ways I'll be able to make change and be that instrument of healing.
Oh, beautiful. And what are you dissertating on?
So my dissertation is looking at attachment to God in low income populations. So it's the idea of like attachment theory, but applied to God. God can be and is a figure of attachment. And so there's not much research on what attachment to God looks like in low income populations. And actually, I don't think there's any research, which is part of why I'm doing it. And you can kind of see like the love for the homeless kind of coming in there.
Sure.
It definitely inspired me to like, yeah, just get a sense of like how does this look? From personal experience, I saw a lot of strong faith in the homeless. So it's just a way for me to actually like do some research on something I was passionate about.
Oh, that's excellent. Do you do research on John Bowlby at all with attachment theory? Does that play in at all? Okay.
Yes, definitely. So a big part of the dissertation is just reviewing what attachment theory is. So Bowlby, Ainsworth, we're looking at their theory and then looking at how God fits into their model, the ways in which he is an attachment figure, kind of meets all the criteria for it.
Oh, so. I'm fascinated. I want to continue this at some time when we have more time together.
Yes, I'll be waiting.
Excellent. Well, Isaiah, unless do you see any questions that we haven't attended to?
Let's see here. I don't think any that have been attended to. There was one here about it being an on-site program. I think someone answered that in the chat, but it is on-site. That's always important to like hammer home that there's really no way around that.
Yeah.
You have to get your clinical training in person. So it's a big commitment. I remember I was talking to someone at a counseling residency, and they were like, I wanted to do the PsyD program, and it's just so much of a commitment. And it is.
Yeah.
It really is. It's an investment, like you were saying, but one that's well worth it. So I know a lot of people who uproot and bring their whole families. Someone just moved from like North Dakota, so a friend, a neighboring Midwest friend, his whole family out to the East Coast, and some from like Canada. So big sacrifices, but
for sure. Oh, dorms or apartments. I assume they're talking about housing. It's hardly the question. Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure what that question is, but the campus does not have dorms or apartments.
Right.
It's not kind of like an undergrad university. We don't really have much of we don't have a big campus really at all. So no dorms. You are responsible for kind of finding housing. There's resources that are provided to kind of help in that process. People will live pretty close to the school the first couple of years, and then as you move to external sites, they'll either move closer to their site or is somewhere in between the school and the site.
Sure. And do doctoral students do some of them live together ever, or is there a network where the students can find housing mutually?
Yeah, so there are a lot of students that live together. I live with actually 3 other guys in the program, and there's a few other households of women that are all in the program. So that usually is the case. As far as getting connected with those groups, it's always kind of an interesting process. You meet people through like your interview days, you meet some students. A lot of people also connect through like a Facebook page. It's like DC area Catholics looking for roommates,
right,
stuff like that. So people find ways to get connected.
For sure. Okay, with that, I think we'll wrap up. Just to restate, I have my Calendly link and my email the testimonials and the application link listed in the chat for those of you who would like to set up an appointment with me and we can talk more about the program. And with that, I'd like to thank you, Isaiah, very much for joining me on this webinar. And thank you for all of you who joined us. And I look forward to hearing from you all. Take care and God bless you. Bye-bye.